Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip.
Ahoy, mateys! This is your captain speaking, welcoming you aboard the SS Nostalgia. This time we're taking a stroll down the deserted beach of Gilligan's Island. So just sit back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship. So how does JFK relate to Gilligan's Island? Just where is this far-off abandoned place? How did everyone associated with the island and the state of Colorado get their names? We reveal all this and more as we sail back to Gilligan's Island. If you enjoy our throwback, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe so you catch our next voyage down memory lane. But without further ado, let's start this tour. Making a statement. It's the ultimate conversation starter. If you were stranded on a desert island, what one item are you bringing? That was the question posed during a public speaking course attended by none other than Sherwood Schwartz, who remembered that question years later after graduation. So he decided to make a show out of it. Gilligan's Island was meant to be a political criticism, throwing a bunch of very different people together and showing that, hey, when survival requires it, we can all get along. But when he pitched the show using words like microcosm and metaphor, it was a bit of a hard sell, especially labeled as a comedy. CBS programming execs initially did not love the pilot, but they checked in with 3 separate test audiences who loved it. So CBS plugged Gilligan's Island into its upcoming fall schedule. Assembling the crew. The SS Minnow's manifest nearly looked very different. For one thing, show creator Sherwood Schwartz wanted Jerry Van Dyke to play the titular and bumbling Gilligan. Problem was, Van Dyke called the pilot script, quote, "the worst thing I've ever read." His words, not mine, Sherwood. Instead, his agent redirected him to a much safer bet, My Mother the Car, which lasted a grand total of 1 season. Because it was about a mother reincarnated as a 1928 Porter automobile. Yikes. But Van Dyke has no regrets, because of the dreaded threat of typecasting. Retroactively, of course, he spots the difficulty of being known as Gilligan for the rest of his career. So in his eyes, he dodged a bullet. And with a PhD in botany and a penchant for inventing, Professor Roy Hinckley is a pretty impressive presence. And that's why we see him played by John Gabriel in the pilot, but never again. Russell Johnson replaced him because producers didn't think Gabriel looked old enough for all the degrees and fancy titles. After changes to the pilot, Mary Ann now entered as a wholesome, all-around good girl farmer to replace Bunny, and she required a new face to go with it. Raquel Welch actually turned up for auditions for Mary Ann, but her status as a sex symbol detracted from the girl next door vibes. And if you need a Welsh fix, she made our countdown of 1970s bombshells, so cue that one up next. Be careful though, it's hotter than the island's sun.
Ask him about me.
No, in due time I must be crafty.
As for Natalie Schaefer, she heard filming the pilot came with a free trip to Hawaii, and that was a big requirement for her to get on board the SS Minnow. Producers went through a lot of actors on their wish list for their potential castaways, and included everyone from Jane Mansfield and Dabney Coleman to Carol O'Connor. Man, he would have been one grouchy captain, but I'd watch that. Meanwhile, the role of Ginger would go to 6 women through the show, spin-offs, and sequels. Tina Louise wasn't entirely thrilled with the role. She thought it made her shallow and nothing but a pretty face. Skipper was the toughest to cast, looking for that balance between angry yet caring. The casting call went out while Alan Hale Jr. was filming Bullet for a Bad Man, and he had to sneak off while filming and hitchhiked with Bob Denver himself. They would travel by horseback, taxi, and airplane to get to the call. Must have been the prequel to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Imperial Sail. Name a favorite iconic music score, and John Williams probably composed it. The man transformed 2 cello notes into the sound of dread for Jaws, and composed a sweeping adventurous theme for both Harry Potter and of course Star Wars. And Gilligan's theme would go through some changes, but it too had John Williams' musical influence. One version had Sherwood Schwartz singing a fun calypso number set to a tune composed by Williams.
What happened now will bring you a smile on Gilligan's Isle.
But for perspective, he was still going by the name Johnny Williams, and I was known as Nicky Nostalgia. The original opening credits didn't even have the Professor or Marianne, and it started off as a 6-hour ride, not a 3-hour tour. And sharp-eyed viewers can see the flag flown at half-mast. But why? Well, filming the pilot took place in November 1963, and the shots of the SS Minnow taking off were the last ones needed. Production used Honolulu Harbor as base. Then news came that President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. Of course, all military ports closed for a period of mourning, which delayed production for days, and kinda puts an eerie, somber tone to the intro, forever immortalizing that fateful time. What's in a name? Did you know Gilligan does actually have a first name? Why, it's Willie. It's never mentioned in the series, but Schwartz's original notes declare him Willie. Probably should have told Bob Denver that, because he thought Gilligan was his first name, and the two would fight about this for years. As for the influence of Gilligan, Schwartz picked it up in a Los Angeles telephone directory. Ah, the good old days. And the SS Minnow got its name from Newton Minnow, who was the head of the FCC at the time, the agency responsible for overseeing TV and radio. The man famously played favorites, or least favorites, as he called television, quote, a vast wasteland. Tough crowd. Bob Denver may have lost the Gilligan argument, but he had plenty to brag about. If his name makes you think about Colorado, that's because the state capital is named after his own great-great-grandfather, James William Denver. And we can't skip the skipper. His mama gave him a full name too. Jonas Grumby, mentioned once in the pilot and hardly ever again.
The crew consisted of a young first mate named Gilligan. His skipper, Jonas Grumby, is an old salt in these waters.
Actually, the skipper has a whole backstory talked about in the 2003 book Gilligan's Wake, revealing he served with both JFK and Quentin McHale of McHale's Navy. Whether that book's lore is official is a subject of debate, but I certainly enjoy it. Location, location, location. CBS built the lagoon in a studio after fog made Malibu impossible. Fog be gone! But sometimes they'd have to stop taping when traffic noises from the Ventura Freeway got too loud. During the winter, water temperatures dropped to the 40s, forcing Bob Denver into a wetsuit under his usual costume. Jump to 1995, the lagoon was turned into an employee parking lot. How rude. So where is this deserted island? Sometimes they drop some breadcrumbs. The coordinates mentioned in X marks the spot of 140 latitude by 10 longitude aren't actually possible. A later episode uses the coordinates 110 degrees longitude by 10 degrees latitude, which probably has a negative sign somewhere in there, putting it just off Mexico's Pacific coast. Then when the Navy sees Gilligan on a jetpack, they say he's 250 miles south of Hawaii. That makes 10 degrees latitude and negative 140 degrees longitude the most likely location. Don't try this at home. The castaways got into some dangerous stunts trying to survive that tropical island. Even though Lovey Howell was the quintessential spoiled brat, her actress was not. Natalie Schafer loved doing her own stunts and had no problem sinking in fake quicksand or splashing around a muddy lagoon, doing all this in her mid-60s. Now she had a formula for staying fit: daily swimming and what's called the ice cream diet. 1 quart of ice cream spread across 3 meals. In 5 days, she lost 3 pounds. I tried that same diet when I was about 11. It did not work great. Alan Hale Jr. was another actor who got his hands dirty, sometimes at his own expense, like when he fell out of a coconut tree and missed the crash pad just enough for his arm to hit the stage. He championed on and didn't stop for medical attention for 3 weeks to prevent a halt in filming. He still managed to lift Bob Denver and throw coconuts around, but it was not easy. As for those coconuts, sometimes real isn't always better. The show tried to stay realistic and use real coconuts for drinking, but they didn't look or work great on camera and spilled quite a lot. So they went with official props. Fans for life. Okay, admit it. Some of you thought the castaways were actually real when you were younger.
Did you make any TV shows on your planet?
Surely you don't think that Gilligan's Island is a...
Those poor people.
Enough people did that the Coast Guard got loads of letters begging them to go out and rescue Gilligan and his pals. The famous skipper himself brought his character into the real world for a good cause. He donned his skipper costume and went to visit a terminally ill boy who loved the show. And Alan did this while he himself was battling cancer, which would take his life at 68. Now that's my captain. Case of the disappearing 4th season. Shoot, did we ever rescue Gilligan? Did we rescue them? When CBS demanded a time slot for Gunsmoke, a Western favorite of Babe Paley, wife of CBS president William Paley, Gunsmoke outdrew Gilligan's Island and we never got to see a rescue. Luckily, we do have a Gunsmoke cast breakdown if you want to meet the culprits of the replacement. The real kicker is that the cast had already bought houses in Los Angeles, so they'd be nearby and ready to start that exciting 4th season. Ouch. Cartoon clashes. Gilligan's Island will forever be in the cultural zeitgeist. Enough so that the Harlem Globetrotters got a fun crossover. No, not that crossover.
I say, Skipper, may we join in?
The series also got not one, but 2 cartoon spin-offs. The New Adventures of Gilligan, where everyone except Tina Louise and Dawn Wells reunited to lend their voices. And Gilligan's Planet, which sent our castaways sailing the starry seas in space. It only got 13 episodes, but would be the last Saturday morning project of famed studio Filmation. Mo money, mo problems. Watching the Howells so clearly out of their element was a big highlight, but Jim Backus was no rich snob. He offered young actors advice whenever he could, and was the cheapest cast member among them. You know the guy, the one who always forgets his wallet when the bill comes. So after the rap party, Natalie Schafer gave him a bill for $300 to make up for all those times he forgot his wallet. Certainly a fun joke, as Schafer was actually a millionaire. Investing in Beverly Hills real estate paid off for her back when buyers could nab a house for $50,000. Land ho! We've made port at last. So what fun fact surprised you the most? Do you know any other behind-the-scenes tidbits that we missed? Please let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And if you enjoyed our deserted deep dive, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you never miss one of our departures. From all of us here at Do You Remember, thanks very much for watching. Now watch your step exiting.
Here on Gilligan.